Summit Properties paid $451 million for 5,000 rent-stabilized buildings in New York, and the landlords on those buildings pay $0 in property tax. The last owners went broke. Summit got them at close to half the 2019 price. I'm going to show you the tax break behind that deal, why it turns buildings that ruin their owners into a cash machine, and what happens on the day it runs out. That date is where the real money sits. But first, you need to see what broke this market so badly that one of the richest people on earth looked at these same buildings and walked away. Before 2019, rent-stabilized units in New York ran on a simple cycle. A landlord bought a building full of tenants, paying below market rent. When a tenant moved out, the landlord bumped the rent by 20% right away. After work like a new kitchen or new floors, the price climbed more. Once it crossed roughly $2,800 a month, the unit left the rent cap system and went to full market rate. A one-bedroom that rented for $1,000 could turn into one worth $3,000 within a couple of lease cycles. That gap was the profit engine. It powered roughly 1 million apartments across the city. Banks built their whole lending model on this pattern. Signature Bank stacked up $11 billion in loans to these landlords, every dollar based on one idea. Tenants leave, rents rise, values follow. New York Community Bancorp was putting close to $4 billion a year into the same bet. Joel Wiener ran one of the biggest plays of this kind in the country. His firm, Pinnacle Group, held thousands of capped units across Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, and the Bronx, a set of buildings worth roughly $2 billion at its peak. Wiener's whole bet rested on the same math. Tenants move over time, rent resets stack up, and building values climb for years. Every building was a clock ticking toward the day its rents went free. Then, Albany changed the rules. In June 2019, the state passed the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act. Every one of those clocks stopped. The 20% vacancy bonus, gone. The threshold that let rents go to market, gone. The tool that passed the big repair costs through as rent hikes, capped so hard that most owners quit filing. For a landlord who paid top price expecting future rent resets, the law was like buying a house for the pool and watching the city fill it with concrete. The house still stands. What you paid for is sealed shut. Rents locked at what the current tenant was paying. The only path left was the yearly board vote, 1 to 3% at most. In the Bronx, where the average capped rent sits near $1,200, a 2% raise means $24 a month. That covers nothing. The cost of running these buildings has nearly doubled in 10 years. Costs kept climbing, revenue stayed flat. The real pain came on a delay. Loan rates jumped from under 4% to above 10% between 2020 and 2023. For owners trapped in flat rents, that mix was lethal. Joel Wiener's Pinnacle Group saw the cost of its Flagstar Bank debt roughly double. By May 2025, Pinnacle went under. Flagstar had already moved to seize the buildings. The wreckage spread fast. A&E Real Estate held thousands of units across the city. When its JP Morgan Chase loan went bad, the firm faced a claim worth hundreds of millions. Related Companies, one of the biggest builders in the country, dumped a 2,000-unit Bronx set for far less than it paid a decade before. And then, one number told the whole story. Sergey Brin, co-founder of Google, sold his stake in an A&E fund at 6 cents on the dollar. 94 cents of every dollar he put in, gone. Total lending to the sector fell from $27.6 billion in 2019 to $11.3 billion by 2025. New York Community Bancorp, once the biggest lender in the space, went from close to $4 billion a year in new loans to just $58 million. Per unit sale prices in fully capped buildings had dropped by more than a third. 57,000 capped units sit empty across the city right now. One property manager in Washington Heights said he had kept more than a tenth of his units vacant for over 2 years. Fixing a single unit costs tens of thousands of dollars when the rent barely tops $800 a month. Numbers don't work, he said. The city's own data backs this up. Vacancy has climbed in every borough but Manhattan, where market rate units still hold. That is the picture Joel Wiener and Sergey Brin and the rest of the sellers saw. A market that eats its owners alive. But Summit Properties looked at those same buildings and saw something else. Summit and a handful of other cash buyers started hunting for properties with one feature, and that feature changes the whole equation. The buildings Summit targeted share a trait called 4-to-1-A. The city created this tax break to push new housing. A builder who puts up a qualifying project and sets aside a share of capped or low-cost units gets a full property tax pass for 25 years. After that, the break phases out slowly over 10 more, 35 years in all. A cousin program called J51 does the same for major rehab work, usually running about 12 years. The tax bill on a mid-sized building can hit $500,000 a year in New York. A 5-story walk-up in the Bronx with an active 4-to-1-A pays nothing, while the building next door without the break might owe the city $500,000 or more. When Summit buys a building with that abatement, the company pays zero property tax. Not a cut, a total wipe. Capped rent still comes in each month. Running costs still exist, insurance, fixes, power, labor, and they keep going up. But the single biggest cost after the mortgage drops off the books entirely. Most banks have quit lending on these assets, so Summit came with all cash, no debt at all. That zero tax setup turns even frozen rents into money in the door. And the lending crash that wrecked Pinnacle and A&E is the very thing that clears the field for Summit. Banks won't fund these buys, so only cash players show up. Fewer bidders means lower prices. Cash flow is the first layer of Summit's bet. The second sits on the calendar. While the 421 a break runs, every unit in the building stays rent capped. That is the deal with the city. Tax-free status in return for capped rents. But some buildings got their rent caps only through 421-A. They were not capped before 1974, and no other law locks them in. For those buildings, the cap is tied to the tax break itself. If a building was already under the cap system before the builder took the 421-a deal, the cap stays even after the tax break ends. The exit only works for buildings whose caps began with the tax program. When the break runs out on those buildings, the cap can go with it. A landlord who put the right legal notice in every lease can switch every unit to market rate the day the program ends, not bit by bit, all at once. A 2-bedroom in Queens, going for $1,500 a month, jumps to $4,000 or more at market price. Run that across a 100-unit building and close to $3 million in new yearly rent shows up on a single date. 2019 law killed the old paths to market rate, vacancy bumps, rent thresholds, cost pass-throughs. But it left this one standing. This type of reset is tied to the tax deal with the city, not to the tenant rules the law was meant to seal. For a buyer who got in at half the 2019 price and paid zero taxes the whole time, that date is the payoff at the end of the trade. Summit committed $30 million to repairs on its new buildings and forgave millions in unpaid back rent. Those moves only add up if the long-run exit dwarfs the price paid going in. Summit has the cash to hold for a decade or more with no bank needed. Iris Capital and the Leafrack organization made a different form of the same play. They bought a Queens group of more than 700 units and switched it to long-term low-cost housing under the city's Article 11 tax break. That break can run for up to 40 years. For a linked program, they can charge rents above the legal cap. Same idea. Cut the taxes, lock the costs, wait. For Property Group closed a Brooklyn deal in February 2026. Beneville Management picked up 3 Bronx buildings from Stellar Management. The deals keep stacking across every borough, cash in, no debt, long hold times. Bob Nakal, one of the busiest deal makers in New York real estate, summed up what sets these buyers apart. You must pay cash because banks won't lend. Courage, the payoff could be years away. And conviction, the rules might get tighter before they loosen. Think of Blackstone after the 2008 crash. Blackstone snapped up tens of thousands of seized homes at prices most people called reckless. A decade on, those homes were worth multiples of what Blackstone paid. The buyers in rent-stabilized New York are making the same kind of bet. Their floor is not just a low price, it is a tax break that covers their costs while they wait for the clock to run out. Nobody knows when the pressure will ease. Mayor Zohran Mamdani came into office in January 2026 and filled the Rent Guidelines Board with people who backed his pledge of freezing rents for 4 full years. In June, that board voted 7-1 for a 2-year freeze, 0% on both 1-year and 2-year leases, covering about 1 million units. It was the first freeze of its kind since the 2019 law sealed off every other path landlords had to raise income. The real estate lobby wants Albany to roll back parts of the law. Groups want the freeze made permanent, but the buyers on the 421 a path see even the freeze as fuel. Every freeze pushes more owners to sell, which drops prices lower for the ones who can wait. What looks like a wall to the sellers is the very thing keeping prices low enough for the buyers to get in. In 1978, 14% of New York's housing was unfit to live in UPS, empty buildings, whole blocks in the Bronx on fire. The city gave owners a path back, and by 2019 that rate had fallen to 0.04%. New York has crushed its own housing before, and it has built back every time. The people buying these buildings right now are betting on that pattern. They got in at the bottom, they owe nothing in property tax, and they are sitting on a tax break that has a hard end date. Every one of them is running the same clock that Joel Wiener once ran, just through a door he never found. The next time you walk past a capped building in Queens or the Bronx, think about the owner on the other side of that wall. They might be paying nothing in tax, counting the days until the break runs out and every unit goes to market rate. I am tracking this as the rent freeze plays out. Subscribe so you catch what comes next.